I've decided to start a new topic tonight. And I had done a workshop on Vaishnava relationships, and then the last about 10 classes I did were on cooperation, which is a topic which is just a subheading under relationships, but more specifically, how to work together. And then I think we covered that topic well, and we've also deviated from it in a few classes and talked about other things. And then I decided that I wanted to speak about relationships within marriage, because I'm constantly having to help people in this area, and I thought it would be useful. Continuing the theme, it's another subheading of relationships in general. And so some questions may come up, and what is the need for me to hear these topics if I'm already married and the marriage is good? What is the need for me to hear these topics if I'm not married and I have no desire to be married at all, or no desire to be married in the foreseeable future? Or what is the use of me hearing this if my marriage is what it is, and it's just, it's not going to get any better, and like that. So general questions, that what's the relevance of this topic to people who are either married and their marriage is okay, or it's not going to get any better, or they've tried, or we're not married, or and not going to be married in the foreseeable future, or we don't want to be married at all. And so does it relate? It does relate in the sense that everything that couples need to learn to get along better are the same principles that everyone needs to learn to get along better. They're exactly the same. So, in a sense, a workshop for couples is a workshop for everybody. Second principle, what if my marriage is, it's okay? Well, let's make it better. Why? Why make it better? Because one time Prabhupada said that if we're not happy in Krishna consciousness, then we can't develop bhakti. In other words, if our relationships are too disturbed, then it disturbs our bhakti, because our mind is agitated. But one may say, but what in my relationship, it's okay. Grihastha life is an ashram, and therefore in our ashrams we should make it better than okay. It shouldn't be okay, it should be successful. Prabhupada had written me, I wanted to take sannyas. And he said, first become perfect grihastha. Or we can reword that and say, become successful as a grihastha. So, what does it mean to be successful? Well, one aspect of being successful is to be peaceful. Because Prabhupada said the grihastha ashram is to make the mind peaceful. So of course, there are troubles, there are problems in being married, as there are problems and troubles practically doing anything. So one may look at the idea of being peaceful as a grihastha as something that maybe it's not really what we're looking for. Maybe we're really looking for something where we become grihasthas and it's so difficult we get fed up with it. And that is true in more of a subtle sense, as it's true with any form of material life, that it's not meant to be frustrated in the sense of pain, but more in the sense of saturation, which is a better word than frustrated. As one is frustrated, often one will give up something, but again in the future go after it again, because one is not satiated or saturated or fulfilled. So it's not that the goal of household life is that you suffer so much you just want to leave. But actually, Prabhupada's saying that the goal is to be peaceful, and in another lecture, as I said, he said we should be happy. Because that becomes a foundation, being peaceful, being happy materially, as far as is possible. Not in the sense of self-centered happiness, but more in the sense of I'm comfortable. Then it becomes a platform upon which we could focus on our Krishna consciousness. I kind of look at it like pain in the body. If there's too much pain, you can't focus. You know, if you have a little pain in your body, you can focus on Krishna consciousness. If the pain is very severe, that's all you can focus on. So that the idea that household life should just frustrate you out of suffering is kind of self-defeating. So that's not the idea. The idea is it's an ashram, we should be successful in the ashram, which means to go through it and satisfy our needs within that ashram, and then when those needs are satisfied, then we can become more renounced. And it's not even necessary that one takes sannyas. It's the renunciation does not have to be external. The renunciation, it's an internal thing. So a renounced someone in the house in Grihastha ashram, if they're renounced, it doesn't. We have to understand renunciation the proper way. They can't be renounced externally because that's not the ashram for renunciation. You can't be externally detached from your wife and family because then you have no relationship. And then it doesn't make the ashram successful, because if we're talking about making it successful, that means husband's happy, wife's happy, people are peaceful, and then it forms foundation upon which you can spread Krishna consciousness, yes, and you can be Krishna conscious yourself. So it's not like if everything's completely frustrated and there's a lot of suffering, then one would think, oh, this is very good because it's teaching me the nature of material life. In a sense, that's true, but as I said, it's meant to be a little more subtle. Just like anything material ultimately won't satisfy us. So after we have something, like I can give an example, I don't know, it's maybe an awkward example, but it's true. When I was a young devotee, our diets were quite austere during the week, and Sunday was our chance to have very nice prasadam. I think now in ISKCON prasadam is quite nice every day, but as I remember in those days, prasadam was quite simple, and we never had sweets during the week. So haliva was a big thing for us. Haliva was like, how can I explain this to you? But the best way I can explain it is it was just an extremely simple diet and no sweets at all. So finally you could have sweets on Sunday, and you'd have more opulent prasadam, puris, sabjis fried in ghee, rice with spice and vegetable, a nectar drink, and haliva. It's usually what we had, and the chutney. So we never had puris, we never had deep fried vegetables, we never had chutney, we never had sweets, we never had fancy rice. We just had simple prasadam. So I remember in those days that haliva was really a big thing, and it was like something really to look forward to. I mean, you might think that's funny, but try to enter into the understanding, because it'll help with the example. So for example, sometimes when we would go on traveling sankirtan, or devotees would go home, visit their parents, one of the things they would do would be cook haliva, because it was such a rare thing that we'd get only once a week. And so now they're on the road, or they're with their parents. It's like, I can cook haliva. This is like the height of enjoyment for a brahmachari who's been starved all week. So you probably think that's funny. But anyway, it's true. And so now I've been a devotee many years, and maybe been a devotee almost 44 years. So let's say probably around 25 years ago, I just stopped eating haliva. It wasn't like a big thing for me anymore. And I was concerned about my health and reducing my intake of refined foods, of fats, of sugar. And it just got to this point where haliva it's not something that I really cared about anymore. People would offer to me and I would say, no, that's okay. So it's not that I ate haliva and it always made me nauseous and I threw it up and that's why I don't want to eat it. It's just because I ate it, I enjoyed it, and I had enough of it, and I kind of grew out of it, if that makes sense. So, Grihastha life is something like that, and any kind of material enjoyment in Krishna consciousness, so-called material enjoyment, which we really mean we don't really mean material enjoyment, we really mean using something for Krishna, using something in Krishna service or doing something in Krishna service that you like to do. So, haliva is offered to Krishna, so it's prasadam. So it's not just sense gratification, but it's gratifying the individual's need to have some nice food and have something that's sweet. So if we look at grihastha life like haliva, then, if the haliva is made well, if it tastes nice, it satisfies you. And then every Sunday we would eat the haliva, we'd be satisfied, and we could go through the whole week without eating sweets. If the haliva wasn't good, then probably we'd be hankering for it. And if the haliva made us sick, then we might say, okay, I never want to eat haliva again. But actually the desire to eat it is probably still there. We just want to eat some haliva that doesn't make us sick. But if we enjoy the haliva after so many years, then you're just, okay, you've enjoyed it. It's not a big thing anymore. I was listening to a lecture by Urmila, and she was also talking about this, not using this example, but she was giving the example that when you lived as a grihastha and then you become vanaprast, which doesn't necessarily mean you leave your husband or wife, it just means that you're winding down your life. Your kids are grown up, you're not starting 3 new businesses and trying to increase your bank balance, but you're winding down, you're simplifying. So she was saying that the nature of the mind is that when you give up something, as you do in Vanaprastha life, you simplify it. The mind may think, but you've given up something you want, or you see other people have it. And so she was saying, but because you've already had it, you just tell your mind, look, you've already had it for 30 years, 25 years, whatever. And then you realize, yeah, I have had this. So it makes it easier to renounce something that you've had for so long, generally. If you understand the goal is to become detached, and that's how you live your life. So that's the function of grihastha life. Now, some people will say that grihastha life is full of suffering, full of problems, and that's how you become purified. Well, life is full of problems, so we become purified in general, but just by living. But I don't think the goal of household life is to get married and cause as much suffering as possible to your partner just so you become detached and purified. And of course, if it happens natural and you can't avoid it, then you have to accept, okay, Krishna is doing this to purify me, but I wouldn't enter grihastha life thinking that's the goal, and I wouldn't encourage people that when they get married to think that's the goal, although I would realistically say that there will be problems, as there are in every relationship. There will be difficulties, but that's normal. As we do anything, there are difficulties, but we want to learn best how to deal with them. And another thing, which let's address the question, what if I'm not married and I don't want to get married? Why do I need to learn about this stuff? As I said, because it will actually help you in your other relationships, because the same principles apply. And if you're a preacher or a teacher, you're going to be dealing with householders, so you may have to counsel them. At least it would be advisable that you understand what they're going through, and it will also help you understand the nature of the male and the female and the differences, because that will help you in your preaching. And it will also help you understand, if you ever do get married or want to get married, it will help you better prepare for that. And it will also help you realize whether or not you want to get married, because by hearing about grihastha life and hearing about the nature of the male psyche and the female psyche, it may help you realize that you don't want to do this, or you wouldn't be able to do it even if you wanted to do it. You say, oh, the women or the man, they're so complex. I don't want to deal with this. It's too troublesome or burdensome. So, for some brahmacharis, hearing about grihastha life actually fixes them in brahmachari life, although it seems counterintuitive, but because they're learning what is involved in household life, then they can make a better decision whether or not it's really for them. And for those who are on the fence, at least that will generally help them realize what side of the fence they need to go on and what's involved, so it's not a shock. Because for many people it is a shock when they get married. They don't realize what it's all about. They don't realize the nature of the opposite sex, and they end up wanting to make the opposite sex like them, because men can relate to men and women can relate to women, and so they go through all these trials and difficulties and trying to figure things out. And so these classes can help people who aren't married, and can also help people who are going to be married to navigate better, and people who are already married to try to perfect it, try to make it successful. So, Timothy has a question. I was reading Bhagavatam last night, and I understand what you're saying, but became a bit confused when I read things like this, quote, Krishna Katha is so powerful that simply by entering into a person's ear can at once give deliverance from the bondage of family affection. Family affection is an illusory manifestation of the external energy. Excuse me. And it is the only impetus for all mundane activities. As long as there is mundane activity and the mind is absorbed in such engagement, one has to undergo the repetition of birth and death in the current material nations. Can you give some clarity? Well, you have grihastha, you have griham-medi. Medi means center. I don't know if you're aware, but sometimes they tie a bull to a pole, and he walks around the pole. You can generate energy that way, if the pole is moving, or he can walk on grapes and make grape juice, or just keep him busy. The pole is called medhi. So medhi means the center. So Griha-medi means where the family is the center of their life, and the family means attachment. Family being the center means attachment to family. And so why Bhagavatam talks about this is because we're meant to become detached and attached to Krishna, and family affection is the strongest attachment, because we're attached to where there's affection, we're attached to what gives us pleasure. So wife and children, relatives, that's where the strongest bonds are, generally. So Bhagavatam focuses on this. It's saying if you want to get free from the material world, then you have to look at what are the areas where you become, where do you become most bound? You're tied up with 10 knots. Okay, how do we get out of these? Which knots are the strongest? Or if I'm going to tie myself up, I should not tie myself up so strongly that I can't get out. So then you have grihastha ashram. So grihastha ashram means a man or a woman. Well, for a woman it's much different than a man, because Bhagavatam is addressing more the male mentality than the female mentality, because the female is always recommended to get married, generally. Of course, we don't force any woman to get married. I wouldn't force Mother Teresa to get married. And there are women in our movement who don't get married, but they're more the exception. The Prabhupada says generally it's difficult for a woman to be Krishna conscious or make spiritual advancement without a husband. So you never really discourage, like we have brahmachari classes. A lot of times the brahmachari classes to talk about brahmachari life and what it means to be a brahmachari and how to be a good brahmachari, and sometimes you'll talk about the nature of household life, the nature of women, with the hope that many men will be brahmachari. But you don't really do that with women because it's not their nature. I don't even think you should do it with men. I think it's counterproductive in many ways. Not that you shouldn't do it, but to belittle women or belittle grihastha life is not smart. Rather, you should train men what it means to be married, and they can decide whether they want to. Because usually brahmachari training is to train men not to think about marriage, so when they finally want to get married, they have no idea what to do. So that's not smart. But as I was saying, as far as women are concerned, Prabhupada said in letters and in his books that generally women have a difficult time without a man, and if they have a good husband, and then they're peaceful and they can be Krishna conscious. So if we look at the statement that you just wrote, it's number one, it's addressed to the man. I wouldn't say it's not entirely addressed to the woman. It's a caution, and the caution is that if material life means attachment to family, material life means attachment to sex. So because there's attachment to sex, we get married. Because there's attachment to sex, we have children. Because the children come out of our bodies, we identify with them as part of ourselves, and the attachment we have to children is extremely strong. So what Bhagavatam is saying is if you want to be Krishna conscious, you have to be somewhat detached from the material world. You can't allow yourself to get too attached, and these things naturally are the center of attachment. So basically it's saying, watch out, because if you don't watch out, you're not going to get out of the material world, because when you're just going to you'll be so attached to these things that this is what you're going to think about at time of death, because you'll go where your heart goes. And attachment, according to Patanjali, excuse me, Guru Nishta, I did take my turmeric and hing. It hasn't kicked in yet. That's a natural allergy medicine. So Patanjali says that attachment arises from enjoying something. Just as obviously detachment comes from frustration or unhappiness with something. If somebody says, would you like to do this? And you say, no, I don't like doing that. It's because it doesn't give you pleasure, or it's actually something that causes you anxiety or makes you afraid. Or in some way it causes you pain. And if there's something you've done that's continually caused you pain, you don't develop attachment for it. You become detached. So attachment comes, according to Patanjali, from doing something that gives you pleasure, because it creates an impression that this is pleasurable, so I'd like to do it again. Just as if it's not pleasurable, you want to avoid it. So there's a lot of pleasure that comes from grihastha life and having children. So is a natural object of attachment. So basically what the Bhagavatam is saying is, watch out. Now, grihastha life means I have, as a conditioned soul, I have an attachment for the opposite sex. I have a desire to have children. I have a desire to have my own place. I have a desire to have a nice wife, nice husband. I have these desires. Okay, I'm chanting Hare Krishna. I'm trying to be a good celibate, this and that. But I recognize that these desires are there and they're not going away. Perhaps they're even becoming stronger. So now what do I do? Well, as with any attachment, we engage in Krishna service. We find out how I can connect what I like to do. I like to sing, I like to play music, I like to paint, I like to write, I like to do so many things. How can I do that in Krishna service? I'm attached to this or attached to that. Or I like living by the ocean, so I want to open a retreat center by the ocean because I'm attached to the ocean. All right, whatever it is, but I try to connect it to Krishna. So I'm attracted to women. I'm attracted to having my own place. I'm attracted to having my own money. I'm attracted to raising children. I've been living as a brahmachari or brahmacharini, and I think about these things. And I think about them to the point where I realize that I'm probably not going to stop thinking about them unless I actually have them, eat the haliva, eat it for 25 years, and then after 25 years of eating haliva, I'm a little detached. Does that mean after 25 years you tell your wife and kids, actually, I don't like you, I've had enough of you, I'm fed up with you, and I'm out of here? No. The detachment is something which is internal. And affection for a devotee, and your wife's a devotee, your husband's a devotee, your kids are a devotee, your affection for a devotee is always shown. But the way we show affection and how we're attached changes as we become internally detached. Like, sannyasis are detached. Do they show affection to disciples? Do they show affection to godbrothers? Yes. But the affection it's not a bodily affection. So as you become more Krishna conscious, the affection, you could say, it becomes more genuine because it's not based on attachment to the body or identifying this is my wife or husband, these are my children. But it's more of an attachment that I want to see them become Krishna conscious. And I am a servant of all Vaishnavas, what to speak of someone who's I've lived with and who's served me. And I should certainly serve them. They're serving me. So, the idea is that you go through grihastha life, you satisfy your need for haliva, and then 25, 30 years later, you're okay. You're not looking at every man and woman thinking, I have to have this man. No, you've already had it. You still have a house, maybe you've simplified it, you've raised children, you've got it out of your blood, so to speak. So, grihastha life is an ashram, and it's a way in which you deal with material attachment so it doesn't become a cause of problem. And if you can't detach as a brahmachari without the grihastha ashram, then you go through it. And that's how you detach. Now, there are rules, and you follow rules. Now, is grihastha life, are there difficulties? Yes. Are there difficulties in any ashram? Yes. Is brahmachari ashram a simpler ashram? Yes, it is if you can actually be a brahmachari, because you don't have to get a job. You won't be raising children. That means you won't be staying up all night with little babies crying, and you won't be tired and going to work at 8 in the morning and coming home tired to now spend time with the kids who are missing you all day, and to help your wife do the chores around the house, which you're too tired to do because you've been working all day, but she's too tired to do because she's been taking care of the kids and keeping the house clean and this and that all day. And or she's been working all day also because you need enough money to pay the bills, and she's also, so those are the realities of grihastha life, which we sometimes make fun of and discuss, but they're real. So being single is actually simpler if you can actually be single. But if you're single and you have a strong desire to be with a woman or be with a man, to have a family, to have your own place and like that, and that's where your mind is, and you're not unable to purify yourself of that, then you go in the grihastha ashram. So the whole point is that anything that you like to do, anything you're attached to do, you use in Krishna consciousness with a sense of detachment. So just like you get married and say, okay, here's my wife, but your wife is not there for your sense gratification, which in a material relationship, you marry someone because they bring pleasure to you. Although even in a material relationship, that doesn't work well if that's your whole mood. This person's going to bring me pleasure and happiness. Because you also have to bring them pleasure and happiness. That's your duty. But even beyond that, as a devotee thinks, well, I'm a servant. And so even though I have a wife and my wife is serving me, the proper mentality is I'm really a servant. So I serve her by providing for her, by keeping her happy, maintaining the house, helping her in any way I can, helping her spiritually. So and a devotee thinks that this wife belongs to Krishna. She doesn't belong to me. So there is sex is allowed in marriage for raising children. There's affection. You do things with your wife. You quote unquote enjoy together, all these things. But your mentality is not that this is my wife. The mentality is she's Krishna. She's Krishna's servant. So still, even though you're in the field of quote unquote attachment, your mentality hopefully will be like this. And if your mentality is like this, then the level of attachment you develop for your wife or your husband will not be detrimental. And of course, for the woman, as we were saying, to be attached to her husband is actually helpful. That's recommended. So, especially if her husband's a very good devotee, then she gets the benefit of his devotional service. So, for the wife, the husband, it's a bit like guru-disciple relationship. That she benefits from the husband's Krishna consciousness. So I'll read your next statement. Then I was listening to one lecture when Prabhupada was saying his blessing was that he didn't like his wife. Otherwise, how could he do what he did? I feel like I'm missing the essence of all this. Surely you must have some affection for family, otherwise you will suck at it, right? Yes and no. Okay. Get married and have no family affection, I don't understand. Okay. Well, if there's no affection, you wouldn't get married. And once you get married, if there's no affection, it's not going to last. But there's something, okay, well, let me talk about that, and then I'll talk about the but in a little bit. Let's define affection. What does real affection mean? So Bhagavatam says, don't become a father, a mother, or a relative, or guru if you can't deliver your dependence. So, and what does love mean? So how do I love my wife, and how do I love my husband, and how do I love my children? Well, real love means to help them become Krishna conscious. Now, Prabhupada said there's no real love in the material world. Why did he say that? Does it mean that we don't have affection for one another? No, he didn't mean that. But he meant love means prema. Love as we understand it, love which is free from any sense of what I want and need, which is the love, of course, that Radha has for Krishna. So that's Mahabhav. It's the highest form of love. So when Prabhupada said there's no love in the material world, that's what he means. And one devotee was asking about loving your wife, and Prabhupada said love is for Krishna, it's not for your wife. So what did Prabhupada mean? He means, well, there's a certain kind of love that's for Krishna. That's prema, that kind of love. And so then all other kind of love is in relation to that, of how I can help my wife and kids be Krishna conscious. And so my affection, of course, the affection is natural, but it's not really love. Just like, which I love you so much I would die for you. That may be there. That's a very high form of love, but it's a material form of love, and that's why Prabhupada said it's not real love. So material love, can we have material love and affection? Yes. But certainly it should be tempered by the foundation of spirit, what the real foundation is, which is my duty as a husband is to help my wife be Krishna conscious. My duty as a wife is to help my husband be Krishna conscious, serve him, support him, not be a nuisance and a nag, not do things that divert him from his Krishna consciousness, as far as I can avoid diverting him. As a husband, to be kind, to be protective, to be nurturing, to be a good example of Krishna consciousness, to have good sadhana. These are all things that help, that we show affection to one another, because it helps one another be Krishna conscious. So what about natural affection? So we show affection through sweet words, through other gestures, kind acts. But we always remember that it's not just because I'm a man and woman and I want to enjoy you and you want to enjoy me. So we're not that shallow. So we understand that, the Prabhupada, I think Prabhupada gave the example. He said, husband's the right hand, the wife is the left hand, or vice versa, and the body is Krishna. So we're connected. The left hand and right hand are connected through the body. See, so if Krishna is there, that connection is there, then it'll all make sense. And if there's no affection in household life, then it's not going to work. But okay, now I have something which is going to be difficult to understand. What if there is no affection? But one has, like, sometimes a spiritual master will ask a disciple to get married. Like the guru will have a female disciple that needs to be married, and he doesn't have any male disciples, or there's no men suitable. So he'll ask one of the men and say, I want you to marry this woman because she's a very good devotee. She needs a good husband, and you can be a good husband. And the Guru Maharaj, I don't want to get married. He says, no, I want you to get married. So this is what happened to Priyavrata Maharaj. He was asked to get married because he was asked to be the king, and he had to marry to do that service, and he didn't want to. Now, the interesting thing about this is that you would think, well, if he didn't want to, how could he do it well? How could he have any affection for wife and family? And how would it be that she could be happy married to a man who didn't even want to be married? Well, he was internally very detached, that's true. But externally, he did his duty perfectly as a grihasta. So we go back to this idea that if you're grihasta, it's an ashram and you should make it successful. And what does it mean to be successful? It means the wife is happy and peaceful and advancing in Krishna consciousness. The kids are happy and peaceful, they're advancing in Krishna consciousness. You're happy and peaceful, you're advancing in Krishna consciousness. In a way that gradually you're fulfilling your material needs, as we said, and you will gradually become detached. So at the end of grihastha life, both you and your wife can live very simply and focus on Krishna consciousness. Now, Timothy, you might say, well, I like to do that through my entire Krishna consciousness as a grihastha. And you can. And nobody's saying you can't. But the thing that you have to deal with, and this is what Priyavrata dealt with, but he dealt with it right in the beginning, is, let's say as you're going through grihastha life, you're becoming very advanced in Krishna consciousness. You're getting a real taste for chanting and for hearing Bhagavatam, doing service, and that is making you lose interest in taking the kids to Disneyland and taking them to play soccer. You could be learning shlokas instead of taking them to soccer or playing with the frisbee, and you have to go out. Your wife's going shopping and she says, well, we never do anything together, why don't you come with me? And you're thinking, wow, what a waste of time. I have no desire to do this. So that will naturally happen if you become very Krishna conscious. Naturally, you don't you're not so attracted to doing material things. But because you're a good husband or good wife, good father, good mother, you do those things perfectly. Because it's out, you're showing sympathy and affection to your children and your kids. Because that's your duty as a grihasta. So your kids need a good father, they need a good mother, they need good bonding, kids ride bicycles, so that's what you do with them. Because that's your service. Would you ride the bike on your own? Maybe not. Would you play frisbee on your own? Probably not. But you're detached enough that you don't want to play frisbee, but you're detached enough that you'll play it out of affection to keep your family happy and your wife happy. You go see your wife's relatives because they want to see you. You do that, and if you don't, your wife will be upset. So that's how Priyavrata Maharaj did it. That internally he was very detached, but externally he was showing all the affection, probably because that's the duty. And you'll say, well, did he really have it or didn't he have it? Well, you could say he had it on a different level. His affection was more duty-bound than natural. But ultimately that's really the perfection. And I know to the Western mind this seems really artificial, and if any psychologists or marriage counselors are listening to this, they might think, this is too weird. But we have to understand it within a Vedic context, that within a Vedic context, what is probably missing most from relationships in the West is this concept of dharma, where it, where you think, well, it all has to be about having a really good relationship and a lot of affection, and if the relationship is not good and there's not a lot of affection, then how will it continue? But if there's the dharmic aspect can actually make it good, because there's this dharma of I'm doing this. I'm doing this to please Krishna. I'm pleasing my wife and children because it's my service to Krishna. And so the wife and children will always feel your affection and never feel your detachment, because it is a reality we have to deal with. That as you become Krishna conscious, you do become detached. You do lose interest in material things. So how do you maintain the balance? In family life, if when you're 50, you're becoming really detached, but your kids are in college and they still need your support, and your wife still needs you. How do you deal with all that in a way which is balanced and still shows affection, even though there's a lot of detachment? This is how you do it. So now let's go back to Prabhupada's statement, where he said he was fortunate that he didn't like his wife. Actually, he didn't want to marry her because he didn't like her, or he wanted to marry another woman or a second wife, I can't remember. And his father said, well, this is good that you're not attracted to her, because that way you always see Krishna as attractive. So, and the second, well, let's talk about that, then I'll talk about the second point. The point Prabhupada's making is that what is materially would be considered a benediction, spiritually can be detrimental. So let's say, I'll give you an example of a story. I may have told this story before, but I was with a devotee many years ago, and he was telling me, he had an Indian wife, and he was telling me what a good wife she was. And because of that, he said, I'm so attached to her. But he was expressing it in a way that he felt the attachment was too strong. So he was saying it in a negative way, which materially, of course, is a very positive thing. That you have a wonderful wife, and there's a strong bond, and you're very happy in household life. But he was an advanced devotee. He is a disciple of Prabhupada. So he had another vision on it. That something that is that good materially had actually become an impediment in some way, because now he had to deal with this strong attachment, which he felt, and he didn't explain exactly why, but he felt it was not the best thing for his Krishna consciousness. So we always want. We always in our minds imagine, ideal material situations. But the reality is that ideal material situations may not always be the best thing for us, because we may become very attached. So I think Prabhupada's expressing that. So, okay, my wife, I didn't really like my wife. But you get married, let's say, Timothy, you get married and your wife is not exactly everything you thought she was going to be. Or Carolina, you get married and you realize your husband's not exactly everything you thought he would be. And you go, oh, this is so horrible, this is so bad, I'm so unhappy. But we don't really look at it that way. We just accept it. This is material life, this is the way things are. People are not perfect. We learn how to deal with it. And we focus on, what's good about the person, and we make it work. And so it's not a match made in heaven. Very few marriages are without problems. Actually, there aren't marriages without problems. That's the nature of marriage. So that's the point Prabhupada's making. He said, so in that sense, it's good, because I couldn't enjoy materially, but from Prabhupada's perspective, that wasn't bad. It wasn't that he really needed it. And he's also, I think Timothy's also looking at it in retrospect. Maybe as a 23-year-old man, he wouldn't say that. But as a sannyasi, he looks at it in retrospect and says, well, it's actually good. Because it didn't allow me to become detached. And in other words, he's saying, and I had this mission to spread Krishna consciousness, and because this relationship with my wife was such that the bond wasn't strong, it was easy for me to get out of it and do this mission. Whereas if the relationship and bond was very strong, it would have been more difficult either for me or her or both of us. So I don't think that's, indicative of the situation everyone else will be in. But particularly Prabhupada had a mission given to him by a spiritual master, so in order to do his mission, it really wouldn't have worked if he did it with his wife, I don't think. And so he's reflecting and saying, well, this actually helped me fulfill the order of my guru. So that's just an example how a devotee will see a blessing in everything. But and if our marriage is not perfect, then we have to see it that way. I would rather had a husband or wife like this because, my wife and I, we don't get along in these ways, or we don't do things that I would like to do. She doesn't like doing them, I like doing them, vice versa. But we just have to look at it like that and say, oh well, this is what Krishna has given me, and this is not bad, and it just, creates a little more space for me to prevent me from becoming too absorbed in family life to the point of forgetting Krishna. So you can see it that way. And if the relationship is very nice, we can thank Krishna. Say, thank you, Krishna, for sending me such a nice wife or husband and creating a good family life, and let me use this. Thank you for it, appreciate it, let me use this in your service. And it doesn't mean that when you have a really good relationship that it's an impediment. It doesn't have to be. So I think that answers your question. If it doesn't, then you can ask. And then ask more. Then Gurnishta is saying, wouldn't the husband also benefit from the wife's Krishna consciousness? Yes. They benefit. Naturally, if a wife is doing service, certainly the husband benefits. If the wife is advanced, certainly the husband benefits. He can hear about Krishna from her. He can see her engaged in devotional service. He can be inspired by her, definitely. So Antonio is saying, I've been reflecting on my attraction for the opposite sex recently. I've come to the conclusion that it has only brought me sorrow and pain. I feel that on some level I've kind of grown tired of it. This is something I've struggled with all my life, and I'm feeling tired of it. Lately, when I see someone who would have been very attractive to me before, it doesn't have the same effect it used to. I've developed a strong attraction for Krishna and everything spiritual, and really have a craving for it. I see marriage as more of a way to help one another by serving each other and supporting one another. Spiritual life, not for sense gratification. It'd still be a good idea for someone who's starting to think like this to get married. Depends how. Well, one way to understand for a man, if you need to be married, is if you need a woman to inspire you, if you need a woman to stabilize you, if you need a woman in your life to just keep you sane, keep you together. I mean, some men are quite fine without female energy in their life. They do well. They don't need it. They don't hanker for it. Some men are kind of a mess without women. They can't even get their socks clean. They can't keep their house in order, or they can't eat, good prasadam like that. They can't get motivated, to work, to make money, because there's nobody to work for. And for themselves, they're happy to live simply. So you have to see things in this way. And so that's the general idea, that and if a man needs female association, then when he has it, it won't become a disturbance. If he doesn't need it, and then he has it, it can become problematic, because now It's like you just bought a sports car and that's the car you drive to work, but you don't really need a sports car to drive to work. But now it's a big maintenance issue because sports cars require more maintenance, more fine-tuning than normal cars. So now, you have a wife, but you didn't really need it. And it can become a problem for you, it can become a problem for your wife. So that's a consideration. If one is still not detached from female association, but one feels it's better not to have it, then one has to be able to tolerate it. And if one cannot tolerate it, then one has to get married. And one has to acknowledge one's attachment, and then not get married and then immediately be detached from it, which doesn't make sense, which a lot of men do when they realize that household life is maybe not what they thought or difficult. They become detached out of frustration when their heart is not really detached. So it's really a question of looking at what's in your heart and seeing, is this something that's going to be helpful, or is this something that's going to be detrimental? Is this something I need to do? In most cases, Western men need to do it, whether it's pleasing or not. The Grihastha life for some people may be more pleasing than it is for others, because some people realize, some people like it more than others, and they realize they need it, and they have more compatibility with their wives, and some people like it less for whatever reason. But at least if you realize you need it, then you don't become crazy when you're married and try to get out of it 3 years after you get married, which is quite common, not only for devotees but for non-devotees. Things go wrong, things aren't nice, and then you become a little detached and you realize, I don't really need this, it's not what I thought, this haliva doesn't taste good anymore. But that's not what Prabhupada wanted us to do when we hit that point, just try to get out. He wanted us to go through it, make it successful. So it's a decision that you have to make, you can make in consultation with other people. I think Antonio sometimes, this will sound funny, ask other women whether they think you need to be married. Not a woman you're thinking of marrying. Generally women can tell when a man needs to be married, just by how he deals with them. And they can tell. So if you don't know yourself, if you're not able to be objective with yourself, you may ask somebody else, particularly a woman, because they have a sense of other men. They can kind of feel their attachment. Anyway, as I was telling you, Antonio, the other day, that Grihastha ashram is the place where we become detached. It's what you go through. It's the process. It's the, it's the system by which you go through to become purified of the attachment, of these strong attachments that we all have, which is the basis of material attachment, which is attachment to the opposite sex. So I have an attachment, but how can I still work with the attachment without the attachment harming me? That's what Grihastha life is. It's working with the attachment, it's satisfying it. It's like sometimes we give the example of an itch. I have this itch, it's a sore. How can I scratch it without it becoming infected? How can I scratch it in a way so that the itch will go away? Like here in Mayapur, we have mosquitoes. So sometimes when I get bit by a mosquito, I scratch it. And if I scratch it enough, but actually the itching goes away. But if I scratch it too much, it bleeds. So Grihastha life is like how to scratch the mosquito bite so it doesn't bother you so much, but not scratch it enough that it bleeds. So the bite's there and I can't tolerate it. I'm just going crazy. It's like, it's itching me so much. If I don't itch it, it's like a Chinese torture. I always thought, you talk about torture, one way you can torture someone is if you had like a substance that would cause their skin to itch and you just dropped it in different places and you tied them up so they couldn't scratch it. That would be an immense torture, wouldn't it? But once you scratch it or relieve it to some degree, then you're okay. I mean, it might still itch, but it doesn't itch so much. So Grihastha life is something like learning how to scratch the itch in a way that you can relieve it, but not in a way that it increases it. And material life basically increases the attachment, because the understanding, the philosophical understanding we have is that when you satisfy a desire and that desire gives you pleasure, it increases the need to fulfill that desire in the future. So what we're trying to do in Krishna consciousness is to fulfill needs in a way that it removes the need, it decreases the need, it purifies the need. And ultimately, we're trying to become attached to Radha and Krishna and not imitate Radha and Krishna. So, household life is, in some sense, can be an imitation of Radha and Krishna. So certainly that's not what we want to do. So the answer to my question to Antonia is, when in doubt, ask another woman who knows you well. Can a step-grandfather benefit from my Krishna consciousness? Well, it says 7 generations. So I don't know if they included step-grandfathers. That's a good question. That I can't say, because maybe in Vedic times there were no step-grandfathers, there were no stepfathers. Fathers-in-laws, yes. Grandfather, step-grandfather, I don't know if they get the benefit. It might have to be in the bloodline, I can't say. I don't have an authoritative statement. Okay, now it's 7:27, and before I answered your question, I was talking about something, I lost my train of thought. So I don't even know if I can go back to that train of thought. So if anyone else would like to ask a question now about anything, then I'd be happy to answer it. And we could end class with the answer to your next question. Or we can end class now if there are no questions. It's this question that Timothy's asking about, how could there be no affection? It's going to be a problem if there is no affection for most people, because most people are not Maharishi Priyavrata, where they can have no affection, but show it completely. That's generally. I mean, if somebody were on that level, generally they wouldn't get married because they don't need it. But Priyavrata Maharaj was asked to get married. So generally, people won't come to the level that Priyavrata Maharaj is on until later in life. And if they do come to that level, often earlier in life, it's often artificial. It's often, they're not really detached, just frustrated, which is much different. Detachment, as I was saying before, detachment and frustration are two different things. Frustrated means it's just I can't enjoy it, but you still want to enjoy it, but you just renounce it because you can't figure out how to enjoy it. If you could figure out how to enjoy it, you would. Renunciation is you don't want to enjoy it, you're over it. So there's a difference. So a lot of times people go into Grihastha life and they get frustrated, and then they become detached and they don't show affection. But it's not that the attachment is not there, it's just for some reason the affection is not manifesting. So what I would say, Marina, a brother can benefit, yes. What I would say is that the glue in general, the glue that holds Grihastha life together is both duty and affection. They're both necessary, because when affection wanes, then duty is what keeps you going. And where will affection wane? Sometimes you'll get in an argument, or sometimes there'll be some distressful situation. Or like financially you may be stressed, and then you stress your spouse. Or you may have, a miscarriage, and then you're both stressed. These things just happen. So at that point, then duty has to override. So it's my duty to be kind, it's my duty to be affectionate, even though I don't feel like it. Or my wife is, husband has cheated on me, and so that just my affection has just been, and it feels like it's been annihilated now. But now, then duty has to take over. No, it's my duty to show affection, to be a good husband, good wife, supportive, like that. So, I would say it would be awkward if there's no affection. It doesn't make for a very good relationship, and it certainly creates a weird situation for kids to grow up in if the husband and wife should have no affection for one another. So there should be affection, and we should cultivate that affection. And we'll talk about that in other classes of how to do that. But still, there is a duty that we have, and that duty is important because it makes up for a lot of where affection is maybe lacking. Either on a permanent basis, it may be lacking just because some relationships are better than others, or we don't have the tools that bring out the affection, or we just become more detached, which is natural. And the affection, it takes more of a subtle position. It's maybe not manifested so much externally, and your consciousness and more of your affection is increased towards Krishna consciousness, so it actually manifests more there. Wouldn't the step-grandfather being married to my grandmother benefit? I don't know. I don't know. There's a good chance, but I can't say for sure. 7 generations of relatives, I guess if he's a bona fide relative, then yeah, maybe. Yeah, why not? But I'm not the arbitrator of this, but of course, like a husband can have many wives, so we can have more than one grandfather. Yeah, possibly. Anyway, do your best to be Krishna conscious. And hope for the best, pray for him. Okay, so Carolina is asking, how can we make sure the affection is not such that by the time of death we can think of Krishna, not the person we married? Well, in the Bhagavatam it says that attachment to the material is cause of bondage, but attachment, the same attachment to a devotee, is the cause of liberation. So, for a woman, it's she's more attached to her husband generally. It's more within the psychology of a woman to naturally be attached to her husband, and so that's why the Shastra doesn't talk about detachment for women, but it talks about attachment. Chastity is the highest principle for a woman. So when you become more Krishna conscious, then that attachment, that affection becomes purified. So yeah, you'll be attached to your husband, but you'll be more attached to him as a devotee than from the point of view of the sense gratification you get. And if you're, in the end of your life, if you're attached to your husband in a similar way, maybe not exactly the same, but in a way somewhat like you're attached to your guru, then it's purifying. Because you'll say, well, you could ask the same question, well, what if I die and I'm like completely attached to my guru? Then we would say, well, don't be attached to the physical aspect of the guru, but you're attached to the guru proper, who he is, what he teaches, his service, and so on. So obviously that's great, and that's what Bhagavatam says. You become liberated. Mahat sevam doro mahur vimuktesh. You become liberated by serving the Mahatmas. Kapila Dev tells his mother, become attached to the sadhu, that will liberate you. So it's a question of purifying that attachment. But at the same time, the material side of the attachment, it's going to be there because it's natural, and it would be artificial to try to avoid it. You can only avoid that by advancing in Krishna consciousness. And if you try to avoid it artificially, it makes the relationship awkward, because you like your husband and he likes you. So should you pretend you don't, just so you don't get attached? No, but you like one another. Okay, well, let's go preach Krishna consciousness. Because we like one another, we can better serve Prabhupada. We make a good team, so that's good. It's not like, oh, we like one another, this is really bad. Maybe I should do something so my wife doesn't like me. Then she'll become detached. No, it's not like that. We like one another, great. You make a great team. And when couples like one another, it really, it's wonderful for preaching because people see that. They go, they get attached to you. They like you. They like to be around you because you like to be with your husband. He likes to be with you. They like to be with you. So it's all good. So now you're utilizing that attachment for something which is beneficial. So you can preach Krishna consciousness. So that's nice. I mean, if you don't like your husband, you won't want to do anything with him. You go, you do your program, I'll do mine. You'll be like roommates. So it's not about being roommates. So we're really just trying to purify affection. It's not like there shouldn't be affection. It just should be purified. So it's not material identification. This is my husband. But still you have this, this system in Vedic society where the wife is very attached to the husband. So she goes where he goes by that attachment. If your husband's a pure devotee, then wow, yeah, be attached to a pure devotee. That's good. How can a husband be the same as a guru? I don't understand this. There's a chance the woman may be more advanced than the husband in some cases. That's true. And you wouldn't have sex with your guru and you wouldn't have children with your guru. But as if you're more advanced than your husband, if the wife's more advanced, then the roles will have to shift. Then she becomes the guru. But still, the respect, there should be respect for the husband. In that sense, guru in that sense, serving in that sense. Of course, if the husband's not Krishna conscious or not very Krishna conscious, then it becomes more of a problem for sure to see him as guru. Then you see him as representative of Krishna in that sense. Like we see the king as a representative of Krishna, the teacher as a representative of Krishna, the guest as a representative of Krishna. So you see guru like that also. Not necessarily does the guru also have to be the spiritual figure, but you can see him as a representative of God. So in that sense, for the wife, she'll see the husband like that. And of course, in Krishna consciousness, we go beyond this varnashram vision, and so the wife also has guru. The wife also serves the guru. And as you said, the wife may be more advanced than the husband. So then, if that's the case, Prabhupada said, then let her guide the husband. You can see her as guru. Prabhupada was very flexible in these situations because, it's Kali Yuga and everything is not perfect. So, okay, if the wife's more advanced, then let the husband see his wife like guru. But you see, your attachment to your husband should also be attachment to him as a devotee. And so serving your husband means you're serving a devotee. So no, I don't want to serve you. No, you're serving a devotee. And service to your husband is also service to Guru and Krishna. So you have to see it. You have to see it all within this unified arena of service. It's not like, I don't feel like serving you because you didn't keep the bathroom clean. No, it's not like that. It's that you're a devotee, so I serve you. Grihastha life is an ashram, so ashram means a place where you cultivate spiritual life. And so we don't want to degrade our attitudes towards husband and wife to such a material level that it no longer becomes an ashram because we're seeing one another materially and it's all about what I like about you, what I don't like about you. So in that way we want to see the spiritual relationship with the husband. And the husband's not a devotee, then it's just, my duty is to take care of my children and my husband. That's also, the duty Krishna has given me. So we adjust accordingly. Did that answer your question, or are you still confused? I don't know if it answered it. I mean, generically we see a husband as guru, because husband is supposed to be leader of the family, and so many of the verses in Shastra where it talks about serving the husband is exactly like one would serve one's guru. So that may be, may be difficult for a woman, trained, Western-minded woman to do that. But just understand the principle. That will help you. Okay, so we're going to end here. Thank you all for attending. I will see you on Saturday morning at 8:30. I guess that's 7:30 in Mexico. And I guess that's 6:30 in Los Angeles. And 6:30 p.m. in India. And Hare Krishna to all of you. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.